Last year, the Big 12 played Oklahoma and Texas $34 million. And now that they'll be with the SEC in 2024, they are projected to make at least $60 million. We're going to be talking all about this and more. So make sure to give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and let's go ahead and get into it. The biggest news in college football this offseason and the first few weeks of the regular season is that teams are changing conferences.
Look back at this moment when Texas and Oklahoma notified the Big 12 that they were not going to renew those media rights that expire on 2025. When that happened, everything changed.
As I said earlier, Oklahoma and Texas are now going to the SEC. And recently, BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston have all been approved to join the Big 12. All of these teams, except BYU, were a part of the American Athletic Conference. And since they'll be leaving this conference, they have to give the American Athletics at least a 27-month notice and a $10 million buyout if they would like to leave before their contracts are up in 2024-2025 season. Now, BYU, since it is independent, it doesn't owe any time to anyone, but it is suspected that they'll be joining the Big 12 in the 2023 season, and that the other teams will possibly be joining in 2024 to the Big 12, given that they figure out the buyout or the American Athletic works out a deal with these teams and the Big 12. The crazy thing about these teams leaving is that some of them applied just a few years ago to be a part of the Big 12, as Houston was rejected in 2016 by the Big 12, as they said they just didn't see room for them expanding from their current 10-team market. But now, since Oklahoma and Texas are headed down the road to the big old SEC, they've now have decided that it is the right time to expand their conference. And when it comes to teams like BYU, the reason why they are excited to join the Big 12 is in 2010, when they decided to leave the Mountain West Conference, they went completely independent in their football programs. Their other sports were a part of the West Coast Conference. But the biggest reason why they said they decided to leave the Mountain West is because they were playing football games and winning big time games, but no one was seeing them because the Mountain West didn't have any huge TV deals with CBS, ESPN, big networks that come on every channel that we know of. Immediately after leaving the Mountain West Conference, BYU signed a deal with ESPN to get their games on the channels. Even though their games were coming on at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there was still a slot where they were actually getting that national television regency. Also, with this deal, they were now able to start their own network, which showed their games also to the Cougar Nation. And that is the biggest thing that was stopping them, is because the main thing to get bowl games and to get into the greatest ever thing that everyone wants to get into is people having eyes to watch you. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about the college football playoffs. I made an entire video about how college football works and how the college football playoffs works. Make sure to go check it out. I'll link it here and in the cards if you want to know all about that. The reason why the Big 12 wanted them in their conference, other than the fact that Oklahoma and Texas were leaving and they were the biggest money makers of all for them, is that bringing in these four teams expands their market and actually fill in some of the gaps. As UCF plays in Florida and they don't have a team currently in that Florida market, which is one of the major 5 media markets. Houston still lets them be a part of the Texas market, as Houston is not as big as Texas, but they still have a foothold in the Texas market. Cincinnati helps them fill in that geographical gap that they have from most of the schools being in the South and their only school up north, kind of sort of Midwest, West Virginia. And BYU has a major international fan base, and they are currently located in a semi-big media market, which is near Salt Lake City. And the biggest reason why these teams are changing conferences is to compete against the SEC, as the SEC has won 4 out of the 7 college football playoffs that have been played. And in the 2017-2018 season, the game was against Alabama and Georgia, both teams who were which in the SEC. So the SEC was coming out on top no matter what. And as the Big 12 is not the only conference competing against the SEC and changing their ways to fight against them. As in early September, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 10 decided to work together in a pack and schedule games together on their season schedules. So this will basically ensue that you will have these unique game matchups that are only usually seen in a bowl game scenario. So who knows, in the next few seasons, you could have Clemson playing Oregon. You could have USC coming to Wisconsin. You could have Florida State playing Ohio State. Now, I know the Florida State-Ohio State game might not be good, but hey, it could happen. Now, with all of these teams fighting against each other to beat the SEC, will this actually work? We're just going to have to wait and find out. Well, now that you know so much about why college football teams are now starting to change conferences, make sure to check out the Her Sports Convo podcast, where I talk about hot topics just like this every single Thursday. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every time I post a new video, which are on Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me know down in the comments below, how do you feel about the SEC's dominance, and if all this rearranging and changing is actually going to change that. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down, because it's still your thumb. And remember, don't be afraid to join the convo. Right here, where I talk about, I don't know what you should watch next. Yeah, it's like, I don't know what you should watch next.